Hello. Thank you for joining me with this podcast, the Bible Message Podcast with Pastor Ron Clark. I'm Pastor Clark. We're going to pick up in Genesis again, chapter 22. At the end, there is one of the brief, this one's rather brief, but it's one of the genealogical passages. And the reason for this is it sets up what comes later. And it talks about uh, in verse 20 of chapter 22. Now it came to pass after these things that it was told Abraham, saying, Indeed, Milcah has borne children to your brother Nahor. So these are relatives of Abraham, and they are up to the north uh, across the river Euphrates in the land of Padan Aram, and that's where his relatives are. And among the relatives is Bethuel, and Bethuel begot Rebekah. Rebekah would become the wife of Isaac, and there are other relatives that are named here, and it just makes that connection right here briefly in these few verses. Chapter 23 picks up with the loss of Sarah. She passes away. And this is very uh, grieving to Isaac, especially, but also to Abraham. When you lose your life partner, especially after so many years and so many stories, it's rough. And it's rough on Abraham and on Isaac. But what we see with this is that Abraham is trusting through the losses of life. And you can trust God through the losses in your life, and some of them are rather devastating for you and for me. And but the Lord is greater than all of these things, and He can strengthen us through that. He grieves, so He understands and comforts in our grief and our loss. And that's a whole study in the scriptures. It says in 2 Corinthians chapter 1 that God is the God of all comfort, and He comforts us in our losses and our griefs. We're picking up with Abraham trusting through the losses of life with the loss of Sarah. So, Genesis 23. Sarah lived 127 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah. So Sarah died in Kirjath Arba, that's Hebron, in the land of Canaan, and Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. So these different separations are happening. He was separated because from his family. It just reminds us that he left his family, and he got a report about the family, and it just was a reminder that he was separated from them. And now Sarah passes, so he separates from her because of the end of life. So Abraham loses Sarah, and it is a terrible loss for him. And we see what he does in response to that. He grieves for her, and then he buries her. And that kind of loss or sacrifice, similar to the previous chapter with Abraham offering up Isaac and committing the best thing that he ever had to the Lord, is a testimony. And so Abraham's testimony at Sarah's death also is. So a story I came across illustrates this, is that a lady named Judy was the daughter of missionaries in the land of Zaire in Africa. And as a little girl, she went to a day-long rally celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Christian missionaries coming to that part of Zaire. There were many believers there that celebrated the gospel coming to them. So after a full day of long speeches and music, an old man came before the crowd, and insisted that he be allowed to speak. He said he soon would die and that he alone had some important information. If he did not speak, that information would go with him to his grave. He explained that when Christian missionaries came 100 years before, his people thought the missionaries were strange, and their message was very unusual. The tribal leaders decided to test the missionaries by slowly poisoning them to death. Over a period of months and years, missionary children died one by one. Then the old man said, "It was as we watched how they died that we decided we wanted to live as Christians." That story had gone untold for 100 years, and those who died painful, strange deaths never knew why they were dying or what the impact of their lives and deaths would be. But those families, stayed because they trusted Jesus Christ. And the Lord brought the fruit of more souls trusting in Christ. Now that story just illustrates that as you go through life and you lose things, you lose people, you separate from people, just realize that your testimony is not only the loss, but it's more than that. It's how you handle that. Do you handle that faithfully for the Lord, even though you don't know many of the facts? And that's the case with Abraham as well. Abraham and Isaac, and now when he loses Sarah. So his grief is expressed. It says that Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. Then Abraham stood up from before his dead and spoke to the sons of Heth, who were living in that area, saying, "I am a foreigner and a visitor among you. Give me property for a burial place among you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight." And the sons of Heth answered Abraham, saying to him, "Hear us, my lord. You are a mighty prince among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our burial places. None of us will withhold from you his burial place, that you may bury your dead." So they wanted to include him. Okay, and I think this was expressing some respect for him, but along with being included, he would be closely identified with him, and that's not what Abraham or the Lord wanted. So then Abraham stood up and bowed himself to the people of the land, the sons of Heth. And he spoke with them, saying, "If it is your wish that I bury my dead out of my sight, hear me and meet with Ephron the son of Zohar for me, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he has, which is at the end of his field. Let him give it to me at the full price as property for a burial place among you." Abraham's reasoning was, I want to purchase it so that it is my own property. It's recognized by the people of the land, and there's no further necessary obligation to them. Okay, and so what does he do with this? Now Ephron dwelt among the sons of Heth, and Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the presence of the sons of Heth, all who entered at the gate of a city. At the gate is where leaders would gather to make decisions and transactions, and often property transactions were done this way. And they're following the customs of that day. So Ephraim says to him in verse 11, "My Lord, no, my Lord, hear me. I give you the field and the cave that is in it. I give it to you in the presence of the sons of my people. I give it to you. Bury your dead." So this was also out of respect. He wanted to give it to him. But Abraham doesn't want it given as a gift, because then there would be a corresponding obligation that could possibly be insisted on. but he includes the field because of their laws about land and property, is that if only the cave was given, then the field that goes with it would have some obligations for the previous owner, and they don't want that. So he's going to give the whole piece to him. And but Abraham does not want this. Then Abraham bowed himself down before the people of the land, and he spoke to Ephron in the hearing of the people of the land, saying, "If you will give it, please hear me. I will give you money for the field. Take it from me, and I will bury my dead there." And Ephron answered Abraham, saying to him, "My lord, listen to me. The land is worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that between you and me? So bury your dead." And Abraham listened to Ephron, and Abraham weighed out the silver for Ephron, which he had named in the hearing of the sons of Heth, 400 shekels of silver, currency of the merchants. So they weigh it out because that's how they exchanged with money, with silver. The weight is what showed the value in it. And so he does this to show that he's buying the land and that he possesses it, and he buys the field along with it to obey the laws that they follow. So the field of Ephron, which was in Machpelah, which was before Mamre, the field and the cave which was in it, and all the trees that were in the field. Trees were very important in the Middle East, and still are, which were within all the surrounding borders, were deeded to Abraham as a possession in the presence of the sons of Heth, before all who went in at the gate of the city. So this was all done legally, properly, publicly, and Abraham was the full and complete owner with no encumbrances on the property. So after this, Abraham buried Sarah his wife in the cave of the field of Machpelah before Mamre, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. So the field and the cave that is in it were deeded to Abraham by the sons of Heth, property for a burial place. So Sarah dies. He honors her with his grief and then the burial, and he is separated from Sarah, and the Lord blesses him through all that and carries him through. And it must have been tough on him, and it was tough on Isaac from what we see later. Later, after he marries Rebekah, it says he was comforted from the loss of his mother. So it's kind of interesting. It makes that note that Isaac was one that really loved his mother. So that's kind of special to recognize in that family, and that's how families ought to be. So through the losses of life, Abraham trusts the Lord, and the Lord blesses him and guides him with honoring his wife that way.